We're surrounded by more information than ever before, yet sometimes it feels like we're thinking less, not more. Is genuine critical thought a dying art in our modern world? Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're tackling a question that's been nagging at me, and I bet it's been on your mind too. Are we as a society losing our ability to think critically? It's a big question, right? One that really makes you stop and look around at the world we live in. Because if critical thinking truly is on life support, it impacts everything, our decisions, our relationships, our democracy, even how we understand ourselves. Stick with me, because understanding this isn't just an intellectual exercise. It's about reclaiming agency in a really noisy world. So, before we even start talking about whether critical thinking is dead, we probably need to get on the same page about what it actually is. Because honestly, the term gets thrown around a lot, and I think sometimes we misunderstand it. It's not about being negative, or always finding fault, or just being cynical. Think about it like this. Imagine you're trying to build something, maybe a piece of furniture. You wouldn't just haphazardly glue pieces together and hope it holds, right? You'd look at the instructions, check if the pieces fit, consider the strength of the joints, maybe even imagine how it'll be used. That whole process, the deliberate, careful examination, that's critical thinking in action. At its core, critical thinking is the objective analysis and evaluation of information in order to form a judgment. It's about being able to weigh evidence, to recognize bias, your own and others, and to follow a chain of reasoning to a logical conclusion. It's asking why something is the way it is, rather than just accepting it at face value. It's the ability to pause, to question, to explore different angles, and to synthesize information into a coherent understanding. Without that pause, without that curiosity, we're just sponges soaking up whatever comes our way, without ever really figuring out if it's clean water or dirty. That distinction, that evaluation is what we're talking about. Now let's talk about why this skill feels like it's becoming rarer. One of the biggest culprits, in my opinion, is the sheer volume of information we're hit with every single day. Think about it. 20, 30 years ago, your main sources of information were probably a couple of TV channels, a newspaper, maybe some books, and conversations with people you knew. That was a manageable stream. Today, it's a fire hose. Social media feeds, endless news cycles, podcasts, YouTube videos, blogs, notifications popping up every few minutes. Our brains simply weren't designed to process this much data continuously. It's like trying to drink from a fire hydrant. Most of it splashes right past you, and the little you do get probably isn't enough to properly quench your thirst. What happens then? We get overwhelmed. And when we're overwhelmed, our brains look for shortcuts. We become less likely to scrutinize, less likely to dig deeper, less likely to verify. We start to rely on headlines, on sound bites, on whatever's presented most forcefully or emotionally. It's a survival mechanism, sure, but it's detrimental to critical thinking. We trade depth for breadth, understanding for surface-level awareness, and genuine insight for instant gratification. The constant influx means we rarely have the quiet space to reflect, to ponder, to truly chew on an idea. We're just scrolling, scanning, reacting, and moving on to the next piece of content. Another huge factor chipping away at our critical thinking abilities is the rise of echo chambers. You know what I'm talking about, right? These digital bubbles where we mostly interact with people who think like us, and where we're predominantly exposed to information that already aligns with our existing beliefs. It's comfy in there. It feels safe, but it's also a breeding ground for intellectual stagnation. When you're constantly hearing the same ideas, the same arguments, the same opinions reinforced, you stop questioning them. Why would you? Everyone around you agrees. This is where confirmation bias really takes hold. We actively seek out and give more weight to information that confirms what we already believe, while dismissing anything that challenges it. We become experts at finding evidence for our existing conclusions instead of letting evidence guide us to new ones. The real danger here is the loss of nuance. Life, truth, the world, it's all incredibly complex. There are very few issues that are purely black and white. But in an echo chamber, dissenting opinions are often demonized or just plain invisible. We lose the ability to grapple with ambiguity, to understand opposing viewpoints, or to even entertain the idea that our own perspective might be incomplete. How can you critically evaluate an argument if you've never truly heard the counterargument presented fairly? You can't. And that makes us less adaptable, less empathetic, and far more prone to rigid thinking. Let's be honest, we're emotional creatures. Our feelings play a massive role in how we perceive the world, how we react, and ultimately, what we believe. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Emotions give life color and meaning. But when it comes to making sound judgments or figuring out what's actually true, relying solely on emotion can be a pretty treacherous path. Today, it feels like emotional reasoning has really taken the driver's seat, often pushing logic into the back seat, sometimes even out of the car entirely. News stories are crafted to evoke strong feelings, outrage, fear, excitement, because those emotions grab our attention and spread like wildfire. Social media algorithms, built to maximize engagement, often prioritize emotionally charged content because it gets more clicks, more shares, more reactions. When we base our beliefs on how something feels rather than on the evidence, we become incredibly vulnerable. We can be easily manipulated. Someone presents an idea that resonates with our fears or confirms our sense of injustice, and suddenly it feels true. The logical inconsistencies, the missing data, the leaps of faith all get overlooked because our emotions are screaming, "Yes, this is it." Critical thinking demands a step back, a moment to cool down, to ask, does this make sense, regardless of how it makes me feel? That's a discipline that feels increasingly rare. Now let's talk about a place where critical thinking should be explicitly cultivated, our education system. When I think back to my own schooling, and I look at how things are sometimes taught today, I wonder if we're missing a crucial opportunity. Are we genuinely teaching kids how to think? Or are we primarily teaching them what to think? For a long time, and still in many places, education has focused heavily on memorization. Learn the facts, regurgitate them on a test, and move on. Dates, formulas, names, all important, of course. But simply knowing information isn't the same as understanding it, analyzing it, or being able to apply it in new contexts. It's like giving someone a huge pile of bricks but never showing them how to build a house. True critical thinking in education would involve teaching students to ask probing questions, to challenge assumptions, even their teachers, to evaluate sources, to construct logical arguments, and to understand different perspectives. It would involve a lot less multiple choice and a lot more open-ended discussions, debates, and problem-solving scenarios where there isn't one right answer. We need to foster intellectual curiosity, not just compliance. If we're not equipping the next generation with these mental tools, then we're setting them up for a world where they'll be easily swayed, unable to navigate complexity, and perpetually confused by conflicting narratives. It's a massive oversight if we only fill their heads with data and forget to sharpen their minds. So if what we're discussing holds true, that critical thinking is indeed struggling, what's the actual cost? This isn't just some abstract philosophical concern, you know. The repercussions are playing out in our daily lives, and they're pretty profound. Look at the spread of misinformation and disinformation, for example. Without a critical eye, it's incredibly difficult to distinguish between credible news and fabricated stories, between genuine experts and charlatans. People make health decisions based on TikTok videos, financial decisions based on anonymous online forums, and political decisions based on sensationalized headlines. The impact isn't just individual confusion. It undermines trust in institutions, it fuels division, and it can even erode the very foundations of a functioning society. Think about consumer choices. Companies spend billions on advertising designed to appeal to our emotions, our insecurities, our aspirations, rather than presenting a dry list of facts. If we're not critically evaluating those messages, we end up buying things we don't need, spending money we don't have, and often feeling unsatisfied because we fell for the marketing rather than assessing true value or utility. Even personal relationships suffer when we can't critically assess our own biases or truly understand another person's perspective without immediately judging it. The inability to think critically creates a society that's easily swayed, easily divided, and ultimately less capable of tackling complex, shared problems like climate change, economic inequality, or public health crises. We become passengers in our own lives and in the direction of our society rather than engaged drivers. Okay, so it sounds a bit bleak, doesn't it? But here's the good news. Critical thinking isn't a gene you're born with or without. It's a skill, and like any skill, you can cultivate it. You can get better at it. It takes practice, intention, and a willingness to be uncomfortable sometimes, but it's absolutely possible to reclaim your mind. Where do we start? First, question everything. Not in a cynical way, but in a genuinely curious way. When you hear a claim, ask, how do they know that? What's the evidence? Are there other explanations? Don't just accept statements at face value. Second, seek out diverse perspectives. Actively read news from different political leanings. Listen to people with opposing viewpoints and try to understand why they believe what they believe, even if you ultimately disagree. This builds intellectual empathy. Third, check your biases. We all have them. Learn about common cognitive biases like confirmation bias, availability heuristic, or the Dunning-Kruger effect. Simply being aware of them can help you catch yourself. Fourth, slow down. In a world of instant gratification, take a moment before reacting or sharing. Read beyond the headline. Reflect before forming an opinion. Give your brain that quiet space we talked about earlier. And finally, practice active listening and thoughtful dialogue. Instead of waiting to respond, truly try to understand what someone else is saying. Engage in conversations where the goal isn't to win, but to learn and explore ideas. These aren't just intellectual exercises. They're habits that can fundamentally transform how you interact with the world and make decisions. So, is critical thinking dead? Maybe not entirely, but it's certainly on life support in many aspects of our society. We've seen how the overwhelming torrent of information, the insular nature of our echo chambers, the dominance of emotional over logical reasoning, and an education system sometimes focused on rote learning have all contributed to its decline. The consequences are far-reaching, from rampant misinformation to societal division. But here's the hopeful part. This isn't a terminal diagnosis. By actively questioning, by seeking diverse viewpoints, by recognizing our own biases, and by simply slowing down to think, we each have the power to revive and strengthen this essential human faculty. It's a personal journey that has massive collective implications. What's one practical step you're going to take this week to sharpen your critical thinking skills? Maybe it's reading a news source you usually avoid, or spending an extra minute evaluating a social media post before sharing it. Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this conversation valuable, please hit that like button, subscribe for more discussions like this, and share it with someone you think needs to hear it. Let's keep these important conversations going. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.